All right. Good morning, John. How are you today?
Very good, thank you.
All right. Well, let's jump right into it. So you are on this hunt for a new position. Unfortunately, there were some layoffs at your current position, which is why you're back in the market. You and I go way back from our time in Shurham together. So I'm very excited that I have the opportunity to represent you in your search now. So let's jump into what you were doing most recently for work at ADP.
At ADP, I was a client relations manager, senior recruiter. I basically worked with the client. The main client I worked with was United Rentals. I specifically had their power generation and HVAC environment that I was responsible for.
Right.
I found myself basically learning very quickly what that business was all about. And they utilized a tool called Workday that I had the opportunity from working with the city to show them essentially how to use the tool and actually set up metrics for them to show them how successful we could be in the hiring process.
I love that. I love that you've got the exposure to Workday. That's definitely the hot software right now, buzzing around a lot of our clientele. So that's great that you've got the exposure. Give me an idea of the scale of this organization so I can kind of get an idea of maybe how many recs could be on your desk at any given time, or how many employees that they had that you were having to enroll for onboarding and benefits and things like that.
Fair enough. So at any given time, I probably nationwide had as many as 50 to 60 requisitions that I was actively recruiting for. Some of them actually had more than one opening. Because Workday they used it for a one-to-one relationship, what I would do is I recruit under one requisition and then would open up subsequent requisitions to basically streamline the process. So if I had 4 strong candidates, I didn't have to just keep them on one requisition. I basically moved all of them to different requisitions at that point and then hired them accordingly. And I had as many as, excuse me, 3 dozen or more offers at any one given time during the month. So I was constantly hiring and churning and burning for them. They had a lot of turnover, and initially that's why I developed metrics for them, is because I saw the same positions coming open again and again, and I had been only working for them for a little over a year. And I said, wait a second, there's something wrong here. So when I asked them for their turnover report, they didn't have one. So I developed one for them. And we started from that point, identifying the critical needs. And there was some training opportunity, to be very honest with you, that was identified very early on.
That's fantastic. And what a great situation that they had you in that seat during that time, because and that's actually going to lead us into our next topic of conversation. You were at the city of Orlando for a bulk of your career in a, supervisory level role. So obviously that experience you gained there brought to your next organization in a very positive way. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the city of Orlando and your time spent there?
Well, the city of Orlando, I really got to cut my teeth, so to speak, because when I was brought in 2008, the mantra that my boss at the time gave me was elevate the bar, raise the standards, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't really need to go any further than my onboarding experience to recognize where there was some target-rich environment for, low-hanging fruit. Background checks, the delays in the background checks, whether or not we were doing credible checks to begin with, was another question altogether. So I literally went through and revamped the entire hiring process from start to finish. There were some people that were not happy with that, unfortunately, because they were very comfortable in their environment. But to elevate a bar or raise a standard, it implies that things have to change. So I became a change agent literally from almost day one, and throughout my course of my career, the hiring managers, to be very honest with you, the ones in the field were the ones that felt that I was doing much more for them than anyone else, which I think that's what should have been the feeling. I went out and I met with them, because the city has various locations. I mean, I worked in City Hall, but that's where the largest amount of people were. But the greatest challenges were out in the field where the blue collar work was, such as the heavy equipment operators, the wastewater treatment plants, streets and stormwater, garbage collection, et cetera. Just getting all of that wrapped up. And understanding how it is that they did business and why they did what they did, and to see if I could help formulate a strategy with them.
What do you think one of the biggest struggles when you're comparing working for government versus a privately owned company? What do you think was the biggest difference between the two?
Lack of ownership of the issue. It became, I don't want to, you never speak ill of your former employer, but the city government is, how shall I put it? It's easy to just say no, as opposed to saying, you know what, you've got a point there. Let's kind of peel back the onion and see, what's going on. I identified, say, for instance, in recreation, we had 2 or 3 issues as it related to background checks. And early on, I got resistance, but I had to advocate, find advocates, to be very honest with you, get past that resistance. And it wound up me partnering with the legal department, because the issues that we were addressing could have brought risk to the city as it related to hiring people that should not have been hired. So, sometimes you have to, I won't say play hardball, but sometimes you have to do the hard choice, and maybe not, it's customer satisfaction, but by the same token, sometimes the customer isn't always right. And I know you don't want to say that, but that was the problem.
Oh, John, sometimes I do want to say that. So I know we're not supposed to, but sometimes I want to.
Yeah.
John, I want to talk a little bit about your, you are so involved in SHRM, which obviously is such a big factor in a asset to folks like us in our industry. Tell us a little bit about your involvement and some of the things that you've been a part of most recently within the organization.
Well, from an organizational perspective, first and foremost, the reason why I became involved in volunteering was I wanted to get certified. That was way back when. I won't say when, because that's just decades ago. But certification was not as important as me continuing to be a very curious individual and wanting to learn more about business, and ultimately finding out about what we could do and how we could do it. And as the treasurer of the HR Florida State Council for the last 3 years, managing a $2 million budget voluntarily, it was one of those things that I knew going in I was going to really, really have a lot of opportunity to grow, but also a lot of need to work. And I did. I would, on average, 10, 12 hours a week voluntarily working on P&Ls and reports and automation, and that was the other thing, is when I was brought in for the treasurer role, I interviewed all of the executive committee and said, okay, where are your pain points with the treasurer role? I kind of have an idea because I was on the council previously, so I would hear, from reports and things, but I wanted to know personally, what were each of the individuals' pain points, especially the president. And the automation of the reimbursement process was a big thing. And they were dissatisfied with the banking institutions that we were using. So I went and I vetted about 7 different banks, including a credit union. But, we have a unique thing with our volunteers throughout the state. So we settled on a bank that not only could provide us with what we needed currently, but also gave us the opportunity to go to ACH, direct deposits, which was a huge leap forward. And no one had been able to do that previously.
That's fantastic. I love that. And it's something, and I'm trying to actually think now where I first met you along my journey. And I'm almost thinking it might have been the Sarasota event, but I just remember, and I think Kate Shockey had introduced you and I originally. Mm-hmm. And I just remember the first time I met you, you were so genuine in nature. And I was captivated by the conversation that you were having with your peers. And it wasn't even a conversation that I was able to be involved in at that stage of my career, because I don't think I would have had much value to bring to the conversation. I was kind of this fly on the wall listening. But I just remember going, he's a genuine guy. And I feel like I'm going to also be able to learn a lot from him. So I think that's something very important for, your future employer to know of how much of an impact you made on me from our interaction, when I was first starting in HR and SHRM and things like that too. So now at this stage in your career, John, what would you say is the most important thing to you about the next company that you work for?
I definitely would like an opportunity to continue my learning, because again, like I said, I'm a very curious person, but I would also like, to your point, impart my knowledge to other folks. I really do enjoy, how shall I put it? mentoring, and that was one of the reasons why I took initially on the state council the role as the district director for the 5-year period after I was through the chapter roles, including president. Is that it gave me an opportunity to mentor other chapters and set them on a course for success. So if I were to have team members, especially if they were relatively inexperienced, I think I could add a great deal of value to that proposition, and so far as their training on education, and not just worrying about myself, because I am at a stage in my career where I think that I can be very self-sufficient and work independently, but by the same token, I thrive in a setting that I can help others as well.
I think that was fantastic. John, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but I really appreciate you allowing me to record a portion of our conversation today to send out to future employers. But I'm going to chat with you a little bit more off camera if that sounds good to you.
Sure.